call the meeting to order. If you don't mind standing for a moment of silent reflection and remain standing for O Canada. Thank you. Members of council, you've had a chance to look at items on the agenda. Is there any conflict of interest with anyone on any items on the agenda? Seeing none, that'll be noted. Adoption of minutes of the meeting held on June 23rd, 2020 be adopted as presented. Moved by Deputy Mayor Meloche, seconded by Councillor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Mayor's comments, just a couple. Diane Hansen's last day of work was June 25th after over 35 years of service, primarily all within the finance department of LaSalle after a short time with IRCA. As well, Tina Walters' last day will be tomorrow, July 15th, after 33 years of service, primarily within the culture and recreation department. Unfortunately, we were unable to provide the traditional send-off as a result of the COVID restrictions, but wish them well in retirement. Now I'm going to give the chair to Deputy Mayor Crystal Meloche as the chief and myself will present the LaSalle Police Service 2019 annual report. Deputy Mayor Meloche.
Thank you very much. So as we said, item number one on the presentations this evening is the LaSalle Police Services 2019 annual report. And I'm not sure, Chief, are you the one who's going to lead off?
Good evening. I believe the mayor was going to start off with some brief comments, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, Mayor Bondi.
Thanks, Chief. It's my pleasure as the chair of the LaSalle Police Services Board to present the chief, who will give us a brief overview of our annual report. I'm happy to say that we're continuing on a safe path with no complaints, with more continuing education awareness and more enforcement. And we're operating within budget, and there are no bad things to report in the report. Everything is on a good, positive note. On that note, we'll give it to the positive Chief John.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Once again, I'm pleased to submit the LaSalle Police annual report for 2019. Members of council have had an opportunity to review the report, so I won't spend a lot of time on some areas there, but I would like to start on page 2. And I'd just like to highlight a couple of areas. If you, in the middle of the page, you'll see the absence of founded public complaints, OIPRD, SIU, external investigations, and the lack of internal or no internal investigations that suggest professional and transparent and a community-minded service. I think it was important to highlight this particular area in lieu of the climate in the policing circles across, not only across Canada, but the United States. In the next paragraph, it's important that members of council know how much change we have been through in 2019. The service has experienced the largest personnel change in years. There have been 3 officers promoted to sergeant, 2 promoted to staff sergeant, 1 appointed to deputy chief. 4 officers were hired to replace vacancies, of which 3 were female. I'd just like to add on that note, so now the LaSalle Police Service has 50% of the organization are female out of the 54 employees. Congratulations to Staff Sergeant Chevalier, Bonifero, and Miss Laverne on their retirement. And on a note with these changes, there has been an average of 6 years, a decrease in age of all personnel. So what happens when you have a deputy chief who retires? In this case, it was Deputy Chief Scanlon. That opens up 3 promotions. When the staff sergeant retires, that opens up 2 promotions. If the sergeant retires, well, it's 1 promotion. So I think if you look at the bottom of page 2, throughout the year, we've had a number of celebrations for promotions and hiring. I'll direct your attention to page 4. And this is an important page. So once again, we do our community surveys of 400 phone calls. And you can see that 91% of the respondents rated the overall service as excellent, 8% as good, and 1% needs improvement. So obviously I'm very pleased with that. And some of the comments by residents, you can see just below that, and you can see the comments on the right-hand side of the page. I think it's important to, once again, I seem to say this all the time, but it's important to know that if you multiply 400, sometimes there were more, 450 a year over the past 13 years, that's a lot of households. That's probably 75% of all the households in LaSalle. Equally as important, it is my responsibility to report public complaints. So at the bottom of page 4, we have had 1 public complaint regarding the services that were provided, and that 1 minor complaint was deemed to be unsubstantiated. We also had 3 complaints regarding the conduct of a police officer, minor in nature. All 3 were determined to be unfounded or unsubstantiated. So when I say unfounded or unsubstantiated, generally it's not me or the senior team that makes that decision. So obviously I'm pleased there's been no formal issues or matters concerning the organization in 2019. I'm now referring to pages 5 and 6. You can see that our statistics are trending upwards in almost most areas. Our activity, you can see our activities are up 14%, and our occurrences for 2019 are up 11%. So you go from 11,000 to 13,000. As well, you can see that halfway in the page, the reportable calls. So the difference between an occurrence and a reportable call would be like, for example, a noisy party at 2 a.m, an ongoing issue. Officers would attend, they would address the issue, they would make a notation, but there wouldn't be any follow-up in most cases. But if there was a follow-up or required some investigation of some sort, then it would be a reportable call. So you can see that we're trending upwards in those areas, as well as the overall crime trends. But the overall crime trends are tracking upwards in most communities across not only Ontario, but Canada. But it's important to know, it's important that I point out rather, that still I have no public safety issues to report upon. And I believe that when you do these community surveys, and I'm sure all members of council hear from residents, that public confidence remains at the utmost. It is, I can't stress how important it is to have public confidence in their police. And number 3 is public costs. So the 3 Ps I've been talking about for years is public costs. I think that the cost of the LaSalle Police operations are well below those across Ontario. On page 7, I'm also required by legislation to report our approved budget for 2019 and the cost of doing business in 2019. I do want to point out one last thing is the cover of the annual report. One of my staff put this together, and I think it was just an amazing cover for the annual report. So kudos to the staff for coming up with this beautiful view of LaSalle in our patrol boat. If members of council have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you very much, Chief. Any member of council have any questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Carrick.
Thank you. I've been involved over the years in the police service myself, on the board, et cetera. Chief, and known you a long time. And this is an excellent report, and our service is excellent. So I want to thank you and your members in service and administration and the board as well for continuing to give you the support and making sure that we are safe and protected, as well as wishing you a happy retirement, because I'm pretty sure I won't see you publicly again. Good luck, buddy.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Oh, Councillor Reno.
Thank you. I just wanted to also say it's very important the public perception and the public confidence is continuing to stay high. That is a big reflection on the people that we have in place, including yourself, Chief. I want to thank you and congratulate you. I read something on the internet that you may be retiring at the end of the year. So if this is going to be our last time to see you on the screen, I want to thank you for your professionalism, your kindness. Anytime the few times I had to come in and see you, you were always very professional and very welcoming. And when I would see you in any other types of situations, you've always been a very good person and a very good resource. And I would like to thank you for your service, not just since I've been around, but since you've been around. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As someone who sits on the Police Services Board, I too would also like to thank you for all your service and the time you've given to our town. The report, again, is another great report presented, and why we support our own local policing. This report gives every information anyone ever needs to know about our town and why we love it and why we protect our local police service. So thank you very much for the support. Mayor Bondi, do you want to end with anything before we take a vote? Or actually, I'm sorry, receive it?
I'm not going to say anything about, sorry. Okay, sorry, I have to use the mic. I'm not going to say anything about his retirement because I will see him a few more times, I'm sure, before retirement. But publicly, Chief, we go back a long way. Even before I was in politics, I knew the chief. So I appreciate what he's done on the job, off the job, and he's leaving with being the leader of the 9th safest community in Canada. So thanks, Chief, for that. And I'll hand it back to you, Crystal.
Great. Anyone else? If that is it, then if I can get a motion to receive the report presented this evening, Councillor Reno and Councillor Desjarlais, all in favor? Great. Thank you. And I'll turn it back over to Mayor Bondi.
Thank you. We have no public meetings and or hearings and no delegations, so we'll go to report E1, the 2019 audited financial statements. And I think we'll bring Tano up for that. Oh, Dale. Okay, Dale.
Okay. So you can see before you the audited financial statements and the audit findings report. This year, as in past years, the audit went really smoothly. It was a transition year this year, with it being Diane's last year at preparing the all the audit files, and also Chantel Anson kind of taking over and leading the process. It went really smoothly. We're going to miss Diane. She's done a great job over the years, and she's also done a great job at showing Chantel the ropes over the past 5 months. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but we also have the engagement partner in the meeting. Her name's Katie Denbaugh, and I'll turn it over to her if she has any comments to make.
Sure. Thanks, Dale. Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me with you this evening. I just had a couple of comments to make on our audit findings reports, trusting that everyone has had a chance to look through it. Really just wanted to say that anything that was critical or required to be communicated to you is contained in that report. And as you can see, there was just at the point in time when this report was prepared, there was the receipt of legal inquiry letters outstanding. Those have now been received. So pending the discussion of council and the council's approval of the financial statements and obtaining our required management representation letter, we anticipate being able to issue a clean auditor's report on the financial statements. In the report, we have detailed the level of materiality that we use, the risks that are present in every organization that we audit, as well as some estimates that we audit in the financial statements. And we've detailed the procedures that we go through over those specific areas with no issues to note. So I won't go into detail on those. As Dale mentioned, things did go very smoothly, despite the fact that we completed our audit entirely remotely this year. There were no corrected or uncorrected audit adjustments that we identified, and no control deficiencies that we identified as part of our audit either. In the appendix to our report, we've just included some information for you on our required communications, as well as some upcoming changes to public sector accounting standards. None that come into effect until fiscal 2022 though. So we'll be working with Dale and Tano over the course of the next year or so, just to make sure that we're all up to speed on what's coming down the pipeline and how to address it. And then there's also some resources for you relating to COVID-19, the impact that it had on our audit, as well as a resource page for you. Sorry, I thought my video was going that whole time. Hopefully you guys could hear me. I'm not in a particularly good spot. Can everyone hear me? Okay, fantastic. So those were really the highlights of our audit findings report, and I'm happy to take questions if anybody should have them.
Councillor Akpata.
Through you, your worship, just from your perspective, after reviewing the audit, I've got to believe that since you have no findings of concern, that you're satisfied with the accounting practices and procedures that Dale and his team are following within the town of LaSalle?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you very much.
Okay, seeing no other questions, council's pleasure. Moved by Councillor Desjarlais, seconded by Councillor Akpata. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Katie.
My pleasure.
Report E2, drainage engineer appointment, proposed St. Michael's branch drain. Peter? Oh, there's Jonathan, sorry. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Thank you. So we received this petition for the area, a piece of property near Malden and Bouffard, property that's requesting a drainage outlet. This area is part of the St. Michael's overall drainage area, but the existing ditch that runs kind of near it isn't officially part of St. Michael's drain. So what we're trying to do here is kind of capture that as part of the St. Michael's drainage report. So that's why we've chosen to appoint Gerard Rude, and hopefully it ties in with his work on St. Michael's. And yep, if anyone has any questions, feel free.
Questions from council? Seeing none, council's pleasure. Moved by Councillor Dicho Spagnolo and seconded by Deputy Mayor Malash. All in favor? That carries. Thank you, Jonathan. Report E3, Malden Road EA Addendum Status Update. I have Peter and Larry. Peter, you're going to go first?
Yes.
Thank you, Peter.
Good evening. So the report was prepared by Mr. Solani and myself. I'm going to run through some of the discussions and presentation of this report. Mr. Solani will probably add some commentary regarding some of the planning and the importance of Malden Road. So contained in the report tonight before you is a response to a council question regarding an update on the Malden Road EA. So as council is aware, in May of 2019, council did approve moving forward with the EA addendum, and we awarded that to Stantec Consulting. At the time, this addendum was to look at Malden Road in updating the 2009 EA. Within the context of the 2009 EA, the limits of that EA were from about Todd Lane at the north limits, southerly to Megan Drive. The purpose of this was to look at some of the changes that occurred since 2009 with respect to some of the studies, primarily the official plan, the introduction of transit, and some of the other updated master transportation study and active transportation study, and to try to determine what improvements are required on Malden Road to accommodate traffic that is there today and into the future for a 20-year projection. This particular section of road was a joint effort between the County of Essex and the Town of LaSalle, primarily because there's two jurisdictional bodies that govern this section of road. So from Ream Road to the north, that is under the town's control. It's referred to as a county connecting link. And there is an agreement between the county and the Town of LaSalle on how that section of road is managed with respect to the surrounding lands and the servicing. Malden Road, south of Ream Road, is solely owned by the County of Essex. They are the sole jurisdictional boundary for that section of road. The primary difference between some of those is on the county connecting link portion, the Town of LaSalle deals with all of the planning of the surrounding lands, including access, intersections, traffic control, servicing, and things of that nature. With respect to the section of the county road, the town deals with planning on the abutting lands. The town also deals with servicing. However, the county takes care and looks after how the road is managed from access control and things of that nature. So there has been some hurdles to go through in terms of how we envision and how the Malden Road corridor is envisioned over the upcoming years and how to deal with some of the traffic for today and for tomorrow. I'm going to skip through some of the planning paragraphs within the report. Mr. Solani will add some context regarding some of that as soon as I complete my presentation. But the town does envision Malden Road as an urban arterial road to be rebuilt in that fashion to accommodate motor vehicles, buses, pedestrians, all the multifacets of the urban life, and provide a nice connective link between the town center and the residential areas, the Vollmer, and the surrounding areas for the development. To date, the Malden Road EA addendum has experienced some delays in terms of the visions that the town of LaSalle is looking for and what the county of Essex is looking for. We have been working on this project for some time. As we mentioned, in May of 2019, the original schedule was that by May of 2020, the EA would have been completed and we would have been moving to detailed design for the remainder of 2020. As council is aware, we budgeted for in the 2020 budget $1 million so that we can carry out the detailed design and hopefully be constructing something in 2021. But with the current delay, it has also been impacted by the COVID situation because our next step is to have a public meeting, and some of those things have made it difficult. COVID has made it difficult to have a public meeting. So we have been working, trying to clear some of the inconsistencies between the two jurisdictional boundaries with respect to traffic flow in the treatment of Malden Road. It has been taking over 6 months to get through some of the traffic analysis. So we continue to push forward through with some of those changes. Not until very recently, about mid-June, was there some movement forward through some extra work awarded to Stantec to kind of move forward with some of those situations on dealing with the traffic analysis. Council has expressed a desire, and I'm sure the public has expressed a desire to really move forward with Malden Road improvements. Unfortunately, the movement of this project is pending the completion of the EA. Because again, we want to put something out there that is going to address traffic today and into the future and accommodate our growth. So, you know, I understand in a sense of anxiousness for the improvements to Malden and Reham. I want to bring that up specific. A subsequent report we'll talk a bit more in detail about it. But I know there's a sense to do some improvements to Malden Road and Reham. And that is part of the EA. It is one of the more remote sections of the aspects, because unfortunately, when we do improvements to that intersection, the drainage has to be improved. The unfortunate part is that drainage flows northerly all the way to the Cahill drain. So it's not just improving the intersection, it's improving at least the storm drainage from Reham all the way down to the Cahill drain. So as part of the EA, as we move forward with the EA, the phasing and that stuff will be looked at as part of the EA addendum. So with that, the updated schedule from Stantec at this point is that sometime in August or September of 2020, we will be trying to have a public meeting around that time. We're currently reviewing the method on how we deliver a public meeting because this will attract significant amounts of people to have input and review the upgrades and improvements. So with that, on the financial implications, I'll go through the financial implications of this. So the three recommendations as part of this report is that council received this report, that council authorized administration to request to the County of Essex to move the Connecting Link program on Malden Road from Reham to Gulfview Drive, thus making Malden Road north of Gulfview Drive a connecting link. And furthermore, as part of this, there's another recommendation here. So there's a number of other county roads that traverse through the town. So that council is we're looking for council to authorize administration to prepare a subsequent report outlining the town's position on the remaining county roads traversing the town. From a financial implication standpoint, the Connecting Link program is an agreement, like as I mentioned, between the county and the town. The county is still required for 2 lanes of the road. So if that agreement continues forward and we move forward with modifying the Connecting Link location on Malden Road, the county would still be responsible for 2 lanes of the road. The other widening of the road from a town's perspective, that is not currently in our budget. It is primarily growth related, and we are going through a DC component right now, which would be a DC relatable expense. So as we progress through that DC study, the additions and the widenings of Malden Road for the remainder south of Reham would be folded into our DC. It currently is in our DC north of Reham. It will be folded into the DC south of Reham. So with that, that's the finalization of what I wanted to speak about. Mr. Solani, if he wants to add something further on the planning side.
Thanks, Peter. Your worship and members of council, I'll just add a few things to what Mr. Mara has provided by way of some context. As council will recall, in 2018, we adopted a new official plan, and part of that official plan, we had extensive consultation in the community and with stakeholders and our business community and various other interested parties. As well, in 2019, we went through a fairly extensive economic development study for the community as well. In both of those exercises, what was pointed out is that it was important for LaSalle over the next 10 to 20 years to have opportunities for economic development in terms of creating new employment within the community and also providing additional places where people could shop, where they could go and purchase goods, and where they could socialize within the community. So we have a strong downtown core here in the town center, and we have a strong core down at the Vollmer complex with respect to services and programming and activities. This Malden Road corridor is identified as a mixed-use corridor. And the purpose of the mixed-use corridor is to provide opportunities over the next 10 and 20 years as the community continues to grow and as the needs of the community evolve over time. There will be a need to have redevelopment take place along that core. And that's the core where transit is going to continue to grow over time in terms of ridership as the population increases and as more people move to LaSalle, as well as opportunities to provide additional safe cycling facilities and places for people to walk from the various residential neighborhoods on both sides of Malden Road. So we have a strong, robust planning framework for how that redevelopment is going to take place over the coming years. What is missing from that framework is we don't have currently a infrastructure plan that supports that. The infrastructure vision for this part of Malden Road is quite different. The setback requirements, the speed limit that are being provided for, and the access control is very much along the lines of moving cars and vehicles as quickly as possible through the corridor. And it's based on standards that were developed many years ago in Essex County. So Peter and myself, we've had a number of meetings and discussions, and there's a different philosophy with respect to what infrastructure services would like to see by way of county roads, managed more from the point of view of moving traffic quickly between communities, as opposed to the importance of this corridor as a mixed use area where people are going to live, where they're going to work, and where they're going to socialize, where it's safer, cars are moving slower, and they're able to stop and enjoy the services that will become available in that corridor as it redevelops over time. So for those reasons and a number of others that have come forward in the months that we've been working on this, the position of administration is that we think it's important for council to look at this area as a connecting link. And that will provide greater possibilities for the town to manage this corridor today and into the future in a way that is supportive of what LaSalle residents and what LaSalle Council and LaSalle businesses would like to see become the reality in the coming years in this corridor. So that's the essence from the point of view of the context for where these recommendations are coming from. And we believe that it's in the best interest of the community for all of the reasons that I've stated there, that we move forward with this recommendation at this time. And both Peter and I are available for questions.
Thank you, Peter and Mr. Solani. Council questions, Councillor Reno, then Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is more concerning the connecting link designation. So just so I understand a little better, right now the county basically controls everything south of Ram Road. And by moving this point or this connecting link, it means that we are now going to take control of everything from Gulfview north. Is that correct?
That is correct. If the current language of the agreement stands as it sits today, that is correct. Everything north of Gulfview, when it gets moved, will be under the control and jurisdiction of the town of LaSalle.
Okay, and financial implications, I mean, is there, I mean, obviously they're doing a little snow plowing or something, but in the big scheme of things, this isn't gonna cost us a lot to do.
It's important to note that snow plowing on the connecting link is still done by the county. That will not change, so they will still continue to snow plow. Like I had mentioned, that if the current connecting link agreement remains unchanged, from a winter operations standpoint, there will be no changes to Malden Road. So that won't change, and the county will still continue to do that snow plowing.
Thank you.
Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess my question is in regards to the Rhea Malden intersection. So this stuff is going to take years. We're not talking months. But 10 to 20-year plan, I get it, and I completely support the recommendations. The concern I have is that particular intersection. And I understand we are responsible for the intersection itself. We can control the intersection as far as looking at lights. I'm talking about traffic lights. They could be temporary or permanent / whatever, because 10 years from now is not acceptable, to my opinion, I think. And I certainly appreciate going forward, but is there not a way that we can put up traffic lights there just on a temporary / permanent basis until we get something? Because we're gonna be spending money possibly in the next item on that particular spot. And whatever council's wishes are, that's fine. But at the same time, I'm more concerned about getting that done if we can. Maybe a possible report to look at that, so that maybe it can't be done, or you can tell me right now. But I think my understanding is over the past that we can actually put a signalized intersection up there. And coming from the north, you could put like an advanced green turning on the Rhea, and the rest could be a straight shot in time, however you guys do that. But that's my concern. And I don't want to wait 10, 20 years to get that corner fixed. And that's just my opinion. So if someone could answer that, that'd be great.
To your question, Councilor Carrick, so you bring up a good point. The intention of administration is to finish the EA and bring forward a plan on how to implement improvements to Malden Road. The plan is not to wait 10 years. Again, it comes down to budgeting, and certainly council has the authority to authorize the budgeting process and where that money is spent. So from an administration standpoint, once the EA is completed, that is why we put away $1 million for this year to complete the detailed design, which is very important because we need the detailed design in order to identify what is it one phase? Is it 2 phases? What's the magnitude of cost? And how do we bring that forward? The EA itself looks for at the 10 to 20 year planning horizon, so that whatever improvements we do can be accommodated and are done for now and for future growth. With respect to a temporary signal, it becomes very difficult to put a temporary signal without doing pavement improvements and pavement widenings. You really need to create some sort of turn lane there, because we did try to look at an advanced green, but certainly, it is going to be pretty tough for vehicles to make the turn. And I believe that we will cause a bit more congestion on Malden Road. It'll certainly make it easier on Rhea Road, but I believe on Malden Road, we're going to cause more congestion and back up on Malden Road at that location without trying to fit in turn lanes. And the difficulty part with turn lanes is increased pavement and drainage and things of that nature. The system is not designed to handle the additional drainage and things of that nature with respect to more pavement. So certainly council's wishes, we can certainly look at that, but there is going to be some implications. And if we were to look at signals, it would really be nice to kind of understand that we can try to put them in the permanent locations of the future intersection, but the EA has to be done in order for us to identify what does that future intersection look like.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate your response. Just that, so I will be patient and we'll wait till the EA is done.
Before Deputy Mayor Malash, Joe Militia would like to make a comment.
Councillor Carrick, I think one of the think the gist of your problem, the gist of your comments are that, again, council, you as a member of council, and I think all of council, on a uniform basis have expressed concerns over that intersection and what can we do. And again, as administration, we understand that. But at this point, with the current jurisdictional issues that we have, that is the crux of the problem at this point. And so what the report before council is to move the boundary away from the REAM side of things for a number of reasons, but also to included in that is to go forward and to be able to manage that intersection in how we see fit. Whether that is how, again, whether it's with a temporary, permanent, or however that solution looks like at that location, we can't go forward without having the jurisdictional issue resolved. And that's what the report at this point is all about.
Deputy Mayor Meloche.
Thank you, Mayor Bonnie. Through you to maybe actually Joe, just because it kind of goes off the comments he just made. So when we're talking about trying to get the County of Essex to move the Connecting Link program, what type of time frame could that take? Because I'm with Councillor Carrick, where we've discussed this intersection for a number of years now. And we always seem to get delayed by the county for many reasons. And then we're looking at the EA need to be completed and how long down the road that is. COVID, unfortunately, has delayed everything on us. I'm wondering, with us waiting for the county, is that a reasonable amount of time? Or are we thinking that could be a whole year from now before that part of it's done? And if it is there any way that we could look to them to help us support that intersection at this time? Because it truly is a dangerous intersection. And I know our next report's looking at a crosswalk upgrade to it, but even what's recommended, I'm not sure it's enough for what's there right now. So I guess my question really to you is, time-wise, for what you're asking for in this report, what would we be looking at?
I'm going to jump in here, Deputy Mayor Meloche, and say whatever timeline we have would be a lot quicker than waiting for our upper level of government to help us out. So that's why we're making this suggestion to move the boundary southward so that we can handle that in our own hands rather than wait for the county to help us out.
Right, I understand that. I guess my question is, since we have to go to the upper level to ask them to do this, is that something that we can do relatively quickly, or is that something that they'll say, hey, we'll look at that at budgets 2021? How does that work?
I think our CAO will take that one.
Again, we're not the first municipality to entertain this exercise with the upper tier. And so I believe that there is a process outlined that they do follow. I wish I could tell you an exact time frame in terms of how long it will take. I can't do that. I'm not aware of what that time frame looks like. I don't know if Mr. Mara or Mr. Slaney are aware of what that timeline takes, but I think in somewhat relative short order, we can move this forward. Again, it's assuming that council approves the report and the recommendation, we will notify the county. They have been notified that the report was on the agenda, and we'll move forward as quickly as we can to basically move that boundary line in order for us to continue on. I will say that, again, just echoing Mr. Mara's comments, it is, again, from our perspective, from a municipal perspective, and particularly from a liability perspective, it is difficult for us to move forward with the solution there that's not conforming with the EA. And so the sooner we move the boundary, the sooner we can get the EA finished, and then that means the sooner that we can get a solution at that point. Quite frankly, this issue has been on our radar for the last 2.5 years. We had hoped that at this time we would be in a detailed design and a tendering process to have the intersection improved. That's what our goal was when we started this process back 2.5 years ago. We're obviously not there at this point, and again, I wish I could tell you that by the end of the year we'll have a solution up there. But again, to be truthful, I'm not sure that that's possible. Hopefully, as we we can move quickly with the change in jurisdiction, and then we can, once we do that, we can then go forward with the EA, run through the remaining public processes, and then at that point, then begin to budget and design for the improvement of that intersection. We understand it's a priority for council. We understand that the community has raised a number of concerns from that perspective, and we're willing to work as quickly as we can, but we do need to work within the framework of the EA to ensure that from a liability perspective that we are covered from that perspective.
Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's very obvious to me that, when people ask us about different things in the community, we can usually give an answer. We can usually let them know, where the town's moving. But every time we come across something that's shared, when we share Malden Road, when we have a roundabout at the edge of town that is owned 3/4 by another municipality, it leaves us looking less than competent, and it makes us feel uneasy because we can't give people the answers and can't show them our best cards, if you will. So I'm looking to move the recommendation. I feel that authorizing the moving of the link is very important for us to take control of our own future, and to do it tonight means that we're doing it as soon as we can, and it's giving priority to this. And I will move the recommendation to receive, authorize, and also to authorize the additional report coming forward with the other roads that we may want to take control of and be able to do things when we want to do it.
Okay, we have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Akpata. Councillor Desjardins, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. Through you. I appreciate, Peter and Joe, what you're saying about the timeframes. And I'm just wondering, through the mayor and the deputy, is there anything that you can do perhaps through county council to help push this forward a little bit quicker? I don't know what options you have at that point, because I do think we need to do something sooner rather than later.
Not going to answer that question right now. Okay. There's a reason, but it's safe to say we will do what we can.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Akpata, question?
Just a quick one for Peter. Peter, a couple of times you talked about the agreement with the county if it remains unchanged. Do you anticipate it changing, or is this just something that, in your professional opinion, we have to be prepared for, that any time the county may change some of the policies as it relates to some of the services they provide us?
Yes, I don't suspect it will change, but again, we're making a request to add or amend an agreement, and I don't know if they will change some of those items within the agreement. Certainly, from what I understand, I believe the other municipalities that made the request, the agreements remained the same with respect to maintenance requirements. So certainly we will see how this proceeds, but it's just to give council an idea that, if it does change, it will change some of the aspects of what we were talking about, but we don't anticipate it at this point, but just to be cognizant of that.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
And one more comment from our CAO.
Just a follow-up comment to that. Again, as far as I understand it, again, Mr. Maher is correct in terms of what was occurred in a neighboring municipality when this situation arose there. But I would also highlight that the county has undertaken a county road rationalization study, which would affect all roads within the county. And so there may be a change in agreement at that point. It may, again, we may be able to put forward our request and the agreement stays status quo. But once that county road rationalization study is completed, there may be a further change to the policy that applies, I would think, apply across the county in its entirety.
Seeing no other questions, we have a mover and a seconder on the recommendation. All in favor? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Report E4, crosswalk update review, Malden, Ream, and Gulfview Matchett. This Mr. Mara.
Thank you. So the report tonight before you, again, builds off a little bit of the previous report. There was a council question regarding Malden and Ream. Attached to that question was thrown in Gulfview and Matchett. And so I took the opportunity to kind of provide a bit of a summary on crosswalks across the town, how they are managed, how they are determined, what is the purpose of them. And then I looked at the two specific crosswalks that were part of the council question. So the report before you goes through a bit of background on how crosswalks are determined. So the Ontario Traffic Manual Book 15, OTM Book 15 kind of designates how crossings and pedestrian crossings are achieved and what they what their layout looks like, what traffic volumes, what pedestrian volumes you need in order to warrant the various different signals in the treatments. So within the Book 15, it is 5 major categorized pedestrian crossings. So there's a signalized crossing. We have those as a typical intersection signal. And also there's also what they call a pedestrian signal with a green, yellow, and red signal head, similar to the ones we have on Todd Lane, Sprucewood, and Matchett. So that's what's referred to as a signal controlled. Pedestrian crossover is one of the major pedestrian crossings that are available. We have a number of these throughout the municipality. In particular, these are what is at Malden and Ream, and also at Gulfview and Matchett. We have a number of them on Normandy as well, just out here by Civic Park and all the way down Normandy. So these are what they refer to as PXOs. There's 4 actual types of PXOs, and they are based on traffic volumes on which one is implemented for each treatment. Then you have the traditional stop controlled or yield controlled. We have most of our intersections are stop controlled. The yield control, we don't have very many intersections with yield control, but they are the types that are used at roundabouts. And then importantly, you have supervised school crossings. So you'll see signs for these. They look like a PXO, but there's no requirement to stop unless there's a supervised school guard there, which is the person who goes out and stops the traffic to allow the school children to cross. They are only available and implemented during the year. We have a number of these throughout the town. So certainly there has been some notation and concerns expressed that some of these supervised school crossings, that no one's following the rules when there is no supervisor or school crossing guard present. But there is really no rules when a school crossing guard is not present. They act freely as a road. They're not really a pedestrian crossing unless it's supervised. So with this, I tried to show how confusing this is and how many different types there are. So a lot of municipalities across Ontario have struggled with getting compliance with any types of these crossings, especially PXOs. PXOs are the process. There's a process there for the pedestrians to follow, and there's a process there for the motorists to follow. And those are outlined in the various regulations that govern those rules. So the LaSalle Police Town Administration has in the past tried to do public education on what is required at PXOs and how those should be treated. So when a driver is driving up to a PXO and they see a pedestrian waiting to cross, they are supposed to stop. It's a yield to pedestrian activity, and the pedestrian is supposed to ensure that the motor vehicle does yield before they cross. With that, one of the first recommendation as part of this is that town administration through Ms. Hadre and through the LaSalle Police put out an education and communication component on how pedestrian crossings work and what the expectations are with respect to pedestrian crossings and what is expected of motorists and pedestrians as well. Some of that stuff, there's a lot available on various municipal websites. Ms. Hadre has prepared some things already. That would probably be something that council concurs tonight, is probably able to produce and release fairly quickly. Further to that, as council is aware, like I had mentioned, we have about 3 dozen PXOs and about 2 dozen different other informal crossing locations. And I call them informal because these are what I refer to as the crossings, for instance, on Mike Raymond Drive at the Volmer. There is multiple locations where people, where they're signed or they are painted on the road as crossings, but they're a bit informal at this point. So through the process of the Pedestrian Safety Initiative that is budgeted for every year, the town has been going through and upgrading a lot of our crossings to be compliant with AODA standards. And as we are doing that concurrently, we are upgrading all of the signage and to ensure that the crossings are compliant with OTM Book 15. So as we carry on with the upgrades to meet the AODA standards on these crossings, we're also trying to upgrade and meet the OTM Book 15 requirements. So the next recommendation is that council concur and support administration for the continuous improvement of the various pedestrian crossings as we upgrade for AODA, that we continue to upgrade them to the crossing requirements as per OTM Book 15. With that, I'm going to move into the 2 specific intersections. So Reham and Malden is the first one that council has brought up as a question. As we were discussing the previous report, it was hopefully anticipated that by the end of this year, beginning of next year, we would be under construction to have that intersection improved. So that intersection, again, it is noted that it's probably going to be a roundabout, some sort of traffic control, some sort of signalized intersection. Once, if that was in place, the pedestrian crossing at that particular location would have been solved and would be providing a safe route. The current crossing that's in place is what they refer to as a PXO Level 2 Type D. That was originally implemented when the trail was built on Reham Road. We had very little pedestrian counts at that location at that point in time because it was a brand new trail crossing the road. So with respect to the current EA, we've reviewed the traffic volumes that are as part of the EA. And what we have done is realize that that crossing needs to be upgraded. So basically the upgrade at that location would be a Level 2 Type B PXO. And there's some additional signage. There's also a flashing beacon that's required there. So as pedestrians come up, they will push a button. The flashing beacons will turn yellow to attract the flashing yellow beacons. This is very similar to a crossing on Walker Road, south of Highway 3, where the Essex Greenway crosses Walker Road. So there is one at that location. There's a number in the city of Windsor. There's one downtown on Olette Street, just south of Wyandotte location. So that's what that type of crossing would be. So with respect to the cost of that, to upgrade what we currently have, it's about $20,000. And again, we would look at doing that as an interim measure. So the next recommendation is part of upgrading that Malden Road, Malden Reham PXO to the upgraded pedestrian crossing, and that certainly would be absorbed and funded through the Pedestrian Safety Initiative that's currently budgeted for. So there is actually no budget required. We have the budget available to do that. And again, it's an interim solution, which will be looked at as part of the EA. And at some point in time when the EA work is implemented, we would look at trying to salvage and reuse that PXO crossing either at a different location, or there may be an additional location on Malden Road where we provide an additional crossing along the way. Again, we would probably want to provide a few pedestrian crossings along the way on Malden Road. So that may be an opportunity to reuse that particular upgrade for the interim measure. The next intersection is Gulfview and Matchett. Again, this one is a Level 2 Type D PXO. Currently, with all the information we have on Matchett Road, where this particular crossing occurs, with respect to traffic volume information, that treatment seems to be appropriate at that location. Certainly what we are doing as part of this report is we are completing updated traffic counts in various streets. Matchett Road is one of them that we will be doing updated traffic counts. So we are going to be reconfirming or confirming what type of treatment is there. So the next recommendation with respect to Gulfview and Matchett is that, council approve that administration continue to collect the traffic volume, and if changes are deemed necessary as part of the traffic volumes and warrant as per OTM Book 15, we will go ahead and implement that. And again, that will be part of, if it's required, it will be part of the pedestrian safety initiative. We anticipate that we will carry through this upgrade. If council approves with this report, we will start the process. We hope to have the pedestrian upgrade, at least at Malden and Ream, certainly done in short order. We would have to get the design completed and the material ordered from that aspect and go from there. So with that, I'm available for questions, and if there's anything further that council wishes to discuss on this matter.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Carrick, then Councillor Reno.
Thanks again. So if I can, through you, your worship, to Peter, okay, signal number one, or signal controlled number one versus number two, there's the price difference. And I know it's a community safety zone, so would that not help enhance the fact that it's a community safety zone and it's very busy? And also, what was the criteria to have it on Matchett at the crossing there and also on Sprucewood and then Todd Lane? Because obviously Malden Road's a very busy road. So if you could just maybe clarify that for me, and because I'm thinking, there's possibilities there.
I think I understand what your question is. So the signals that were implemented on Sprucewood and Matchett, when those were implemented, those were the major spines and major alignments of the town's trail system, which were crossing two significant roads at those locations. They have matured over the years with the pedestrian use and things of that nature. So the determination was to go to that type of treatment. This very similar nature to what occurred on Todd Lane. That would be a treatment because it's a major location and a major junction between trail networks. That type of signal is about $90,000 to $100,000 to implement. There is computerized systems. They do have a computer in there. They do need to have some additional aspects with respect to the cost. So that type of treatment is in around that range as opposed to the $20,000. I think that's what you were looking for, Councilor Carrick.
Yeah, that answers the financially. So go back to the PXO pedestrian crossing number 2. Would that be similar to what they put up at Micmac after that young person was hit at the park there? Micmac Park on Prince Road?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall. I don't believe I've ever seen that one after that one was put up. I believe it would probably be fairly close to that type of treatment. I haven't seen it to give you a confirmed answer on that.
Okay, because that's flashing lights. They're like bars. And then there's the crosswalk. They hit the button and the lights start flashing.
I believe that's the standard up. That would be what they referred to as a level 2 type A.
Okay, so does signal 1 controlled warrant? Does it fit another warrant for that type of signal there on Malden Road?
No, it does not. It warrants a level 2 type B warrant.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Reno.
Thank you. Through you. Peter, first of all, I want to thank you for the report. I mean, we've talked about intersections and things, especially with all the planning that's been done in the last year and a half, 2 years. We get more education every time something like this comes up. And I think your report is very good. I'm very happy to see that there's something we can do now, even without all the steps that we talked about in our last conversation about, the infrastructure of the road and the drainage and all that stuff that has to happen before, major changes can happen. But I'm glad to see that there's something that we can do now to keep our people safer. I realize that there's a lot of people in the community that are looking for more, but they have to understand that there's a process to follow, and they have to understand that you don't just put these lights up. You have to widen pavement. You have to make markings. You have to have something to work with that we just don't have it yet. So, you know, we've made those steps now. We're making those steps to be able to do that. But in the meantime, I'm glad to see that we can do something. I fully support your recommendations, and I'm looking forward to seeing a little higher measure of safety for our residents. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you. Through you to Peter. I also was interested more in signal controlled, which was item number 1, but was wondering if there was something a little less than what we currently have on Sprucewood. So similar to what Councillor Carrick was mentioning, I've seen it where it's just multiple lights, more attention to the intersection without actually having the red green. I don't know what the cost of something like that is, if it's more or less than option number 1, but I'm afraid just that one flashing little light isn't going to do what we need at that intersection, especially if we're looking, like say, years down the road before we actually get the improvement that's needed there.
So with respect to lights over the road flashing, that is what they would refer to as a PXO level 2 type A. The warrants are not there to substantiate the installation of that. Certainly if council wishes to go beyond what is recommended here, that would be council's decision. We did not get a price on that, but I would suspect that it's someplace in the range of $50,000 to $60,000 as compared to when you look at the standard signal head as the $90,000 to $100,000 treatment. So we didn't really price that, but certainly if council wishes to upgrade to something more than what is recommended in here, it doesn't meet warrants, but it just means that just more additional money is needed, and we would have to cut back on some of the other AODA improvements that we'd be doing as part of 2020.
Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you. I would be interested in seeing what the price of something like that is, but also just to be sure, I know we've said it a few times that if we were to go that route and spend more money, that we could reuse it in the future and other area of the town. Obviously, no one likes to just throw away $80,000, $90,000. So I want to be sure that we'd be able to reuse it. But I do think we're still several years away from doing what we need there. And I'd like to do what we can to keep that intersection as safe as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Ekpata, did you have your hand up? No? Okay. Council's pleasure. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Desjardins, move the recommendation and supported by Councillor Reno. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Good report. Item E5, dilapidated culvert replacement policy. Mr. Marr, you're up again.
Thank you. Again, this is a report prepared tonight in response to a council question. So certainly this has been a bit of time coming for this response. Back in January, we were requested by council through a question to take a look at our current dilapidated culvert policy. The existing policy has been in place for a few decades. It has operated well for the town with respect to how and what we had to do to replace dilapidated culverts within the town's drainage ditches and roadside ditches. So dilapidated culverts are comprised of two types of situations. It could be a single driveway culvert where the driveway culvert is just deteriorating and things of that nature, and it may be impeding drainage of the ditch, which is inherently causing upstream concerns. Could be on the road, could be on private properties. Those situations vary from time to time. The other situation we have is there is people who have over the years infilled the ditches across the front of their property to get rid of the ditch. And that is something that the property owners have undertaken on their own. We have a separate policy on how that occurs. So with that respect, they would go ahead and get an engineering design that would be approved by the town, and they would pay 100% of the cost for that initial installation of the culvert. So with the dilapidated culvert policy, the current one, we needed to find a mechanism to replace those, and how do we replace those? So the current policy that sits here today in place is that the town would actually advise the homeowner that the culvert needs to be replaced, have the culverts purchased by the homeowner, and the town would complete the work and things of that nature. So the only expense to the resident would be the actual cost of the culvert. All other work with respect to removal of it, installation of it, and things of that nature would be part of parcel of what the town's work would comprise. The only other thing that the town does not do as part of that is if it's crossing a driveway, if they had a concrete driveway or an asphalt driveway, we don't replace that part of it. We would backfill and replace with stone, and then it would ultimately be the responsibility of the homeowner, the property owner, to complete the final restoration on the driveway surface itself. Like I had mentioned, that's been in place for decades. A number of residents have participated as part of that. It's worked well for us. What we did discover coming into 2018 and 2019 is that we did not have a mechanism on how to deal with an emergency situation. So basically, the new policy that's enclosed tonight as part of this report provides very similar circumstances on how the dilapidated culvert works, policy would work. We've added in a section on how to deal with an emergency situation and how the town would implement measures to solve an emergency situation while trying to minimize our expenses. So that's one of the main changes within the new policy. Also, as part of this new policy, there was always a need for homeowners to pay up front for the culverts. In some instances, smaller lots, not very hard and tedious to absorb that cost, but certainly some of the larger lots that we have been coming across when it's 100-foot frontage, those prices start to climb. So in this actual new policy, we've now looked at trying to implement a payment plan, and through finance, we've worked it out that they would be able to make payments for the culverts to be replaced as part of a 5-year period and that would be part of their taxes and carry through with any new subsequent owners as well. So it wouldn't have to be paid all in 1 year, but that would be carried on to any subsequent owners. And that's also confirmed through the finance department that when a sale occurs between a property, that notice will be provided as part of the clearance, the tax clearance letter. So this report has been put in place. It's important to note that on a financial implication side with respect to this new policy, there is very little impact on our current budget. Again, we've always budgeted to replace and do this type of work. And the amount of times that we actually do it in a year are few and far between. The subject of the next report is probably the largest one that we've had to do in recent memory. But certainly it's normally one house at a time, one culvert, one driveway, one infill at a time. And we probably do about a half a dozen of them in any given year. Council should be aware that, the actual cost to doing this work is, the resident is really paying 20 to 30% of the actual cost. So for instance, it could cost, if they were to have paid the initial installation cost, it could be somewhere in the range of $20 to $25,000. And certainly as part of the town's aspect, when they go back and do the replacement, they're paying about $4,000 to $5,000 for the pipe. And then the rest of the cost is actually being absorbed by the town to deal with it. Certainly, if it's a private contractor, there's profit involved there. If it's the town forces, they are just doing this work as opposed to some other work. But certainly there's still fuel costs, equipment costs, and labor costs relative to this. So with that, there's the policy is enclosed. As part of the policy, we've tried to develop a bit of a decision tree so to try to make it easier to follow through the actual policy. And also what we've done with this policy is we've enclosed 2 sample letters that are part of the policy. So as council, if council agrees tonight to approving this new policy. The policy numbers will be updated and finalized in the aspects in the policy itself will be updated, and that will become formal. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Peter. Council questions. Councillor Akpata.
Very well done, Peter. As you know, I've been involved in some of these culvert discussions, and I appreciate how you've tried to minimize the impact on those by spreading it out over the time. I think it's due time, and I think it's very thorough, and hopefully it will resonate with the folks that you're trying to help. I see it as a value add, and I see it as something that we can really bring to some of these people that will help them and keep everything running. So well done, Peter.
Councillor Renault.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to mention as well, the thought of sometimes someone having a culvert that needs to be replaced at $4,000 having to be put up if you wanted the job done is a bit intimidating for some. And I think the fact that we've worked with finance to be able to pay this over a 5-year period, I think that is fantastic for our residents, and it will actually allow them to do the right thing a little more often, so that maybe they will think of doing it when they notice it as opposed to when it's forced upon them. So I want to thank you for all your extra work in trying to make this affordable and trying to make this successful for all of the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carrick.
All right.
Mark, you're still muted.
How about now?
You're good.
Page 112, under implementation option B, E, it says, in the event that the property has 2 driveway accesses, only one will be reinstated. This will be the driveway access that provides the most direct route to the garage and or house. The other access will be permanently closed and removed. Now, if we're permanently closing and removing it, does that mean that they don't have the option? We're not replacing it, but they don't have the option to put a second entrance in? Is that what that means?
So what option B is if they do not want to participate, Councillor Carrick. It's the option that is implemented under an emergency situation, or if a resident does not want to participate. So if they do not want to participate, that's what they get back. And if they want to do something later on in the future, they're 100% their cost to deal with.
Okay.
If it's implemented through an emergency situation, that is what we put back to minimize our cost. We then circle back to the residents and provide them right back to the beginning of option A or option B. If they choose option B, what they got stays. If they choose option A, we go back later on and infill the ditch through the process and things of that nature, and implement the widening of the current driveway or the additional driveway culvert. So option B would have to be actively chosen by the resident to be implemented. If it's implemented under an emergency situation, they still get the opportunity to kind of circle back. And that's really the subject of the next report.
So you're talking about E, right? E of that, not B.
Sorry.
E. Sorry, E as an echo.
Yes. So,
Okay. Right.
Implementation option B, there's a number of A through E as part of it.
Yeah.
Again, without looking at it kind of sounds silly when I'm explaining it without having it in front of you or up on the screen, but certainly if they have 2 driveway accesses and they choose not to participate and the town is absorbing the cost, they will only get a minimal 1 access back.
So, okay, so but they can still do another one down the road if they want.
Yes.
Okay.
At 100, it would be 100% their cost down the road.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other question, council's pleasure on the recommendation. Was that your hand up, Deputy Mayor Meloche, or yes? Is it moved by Deputy Mayor Meloche, seconded by Councillor Renault. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Item E6, disputed road drainage concerns, re 6610 and 6770 disputed road. I'll just remind counselors that you received a couple addendums, re the two residents. And Peter, I'll let you start on this.
So again, this report is closely related with just the previous one. Again, a council question regarding the works that occurred on disputed. So this issue on disputed dates back more than 10 years now for one or two of the residents, but certainly came more to light and more of an issue in and around 2018, where a number of properties on disputed were experiencing flooding through large rainfall events. And what was occurring at that location was a slow moving drain that was downstream of them, which was subject to 5 or 6 properties having rather lengthy infills. And so back in 2018, 2019, we tried to implement improvements and repairs as part of the then approved dilapidated culvert policy with no success. So we, as council is aware, I'm sure some of you have received the correspondence from the various residents that were out there. So we continued during large rainfall events to mobilize staff to try to deal with the situation out there. Inherently, the 5 properties that were flooding were a direct result of a slow draining culvert that crossed another 6 properties. So again, this occurred for a number of years. And as such, in 2019, there was another issue, and earlier this year, there was another issue in about January or February or so, April, another flooding event. And at the time that event occurred, the dilapidated culvert policy that was just presented was already prepared in draft form, but really not presented to council as of yet for approval. So we had some knowledge of how and what we wanted to do with a new dilapidated culvert. Because we were in a COVID situation, us constantly mobilizing staff during rainfall events, we didn't know how long that was going to be we were going to be able to sustain that with staffing levels if COVID, it was early on in the COVID situation. So the decision was to implement changes out there on an emergency basis. So with the 6 residents that were affected by this, we did do a removal of their infill culverts. And we opened the ditch back up, and we actually provided them opportunity to participate at a later date and still infill the rest of their ditch. And it would be at the same request of them buying the culvert and also paying for the culverts that were put in place under their ditch, under their driveways. And we would come back at a later date at more expense to us for second mobilization to infill the ditch, and we would carry that through. Out of those 5 or 6 residents, 2 property owners actually wanted to participate. The other ones, the other 4 or 5 did not want to participate. And so the 2 residents that actually wanted to participate, really one doesn't want to pay anything. One just wants to pay for some additional culverts, but it was clear and we tried to stay consistent with what we were trying to bring forward as a dilapidated culvert policy, which was just approved. The particular lots in question out there are rather large. They're 100-foot frontages. So the cost, again, for these residents are a bit larger than a typical lot, say on Laurier or things of that nature. So with respect to that, the recommendations, there's a number of recommendations within this report. So recommendation number 1 is that council concur that the original offered services continue to be made to the 2 actual property owners that have requested the additional infilling to be completed, and that we keep within the new dilapidated culvert policy to reflect that. Further, with respect to that, since we now have a new culvert policy, that we would give them a 120-day deadline to respond, and that we would offer this to those 2 residents as well as the other 4 residents, because we would also extend to them that they have the option of deferred payments or payments over 5 years that may change the concerns of the other the other few that were not interested in participating at this point in time. So that is the report. So the two property owners have been notified, as the mayor has mentioned. They have sent in notification. So again, the cost, the actual cost in this particular instance for these culverts is a bit more substantial on the town side because they are larger lot frontages and things of that nature. So this is costing the town 4 to 5 times more than what the actual homeowners are paying with respect to that, but certainly offering them an opportunity to pay for this on a 5-year basis or on their taxes may be an opportunity for them to make this culvert replacement work for them. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Any questions? Are all counselors 100%? Oh, Counselor Reno.
Just as a side question, you know, the last couple of years we've been talking more and more about the Drainage Act. So how would this have been treated differently if this was treated as a Drainage Act where somebody had petitioned, and what would the cost be in that? I mean, it would seem like all of these residents would end up paying one way or the other. Is this just the issue of closing in the ditch? Is that what I'm seeing here?
Certainly, under the Drainage Act, if these residents and the town progressed under the Drainage Act, one, it would take a significant amount of time to get through the Drainage Act to get to construction, to be able to construct it. Two, all properties are allowed to have a driveway culvert, a respective driveway culvert within the confines of 20 to 30 feet wide. Anything above and beyond that for a property, if they want to fill in the rest of their property in front, it's really not a benefit to the drainage system, the drainage network. It's a benefit to the property owner. So if they want to carry that out through the Drainage Act, they'd be paying 100% of that cost through the Drainage Act. So again, it should be important to note that the dilapidated culvert policy does not go on municipal drains. Municipal drains is a separate process on how culverts would be replaced, and that's the process we'd follow for municipal drains. This really deals with those individual municipally owned roadside ditches, like on Disputed, for instance, in this particular location. So if we would have went through the Drainage Act, one, it would took a lot longer to get through. The driveway culvert for every property would be shared by all the respective owners. There'd be a larger component of that to the actual property it's servicing. And then certainly anything above and beyond a standard access would be 100% to the benefiting property owner.
Thank you very much.
Peter, I'm going to take this opportunity just so we can be clear that all counselors understand what they're voting on. So they approve this recommendation. The property owners affected where we did the repairs undisputed. Presently, the homeowners are not participating to pay for the culverts that have been replaced, correct?
Correct.
If we approve this, they will have 120 days to approve payments on their taxes. And if not, we're going to put it on their taxes? I just want
No. They have to actively agree to have the infill completed. So the infill will be charged. The pipe required to complete the infill across the property will be charged to the resident, including what is already in place under their driveways. Again, if you go back to the dilapidated culvert policy, that's what states under an emergency situation. In fact, we would have only put back a 15-foot wide driveway under an emergency situation. But in this case, we put back their whole width of their driveway. So they already got back probably 2 to 3 times the amount of culvert that we would have put in if the culvert policy was in place when we did the emergency situation.
Okay, so if no other property owners take up infilling, we only have letters, emails from 2 residents that want to infill. If they infill, they're going to pay for a portion of the culverts replaced for the driveways. If the other 4 do not, they don't pay anything for their driveway culverts that were replaced. Do we have any other questions before we vote on this? Seeing none, council's pleasure. Councilor Reno. Are you moving the recommendation, Councilor Reno? Moved by Councilor Reno. Is that a second by Deputy Mayor Malash? Or is that a question? Question, Deputy Mayor Malash.
Sorry, I'm kind of reading through some of the things we received afterwards, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around the letters sent to us about us removing things that were already there, and now this is an additional cost to them that they shouldn't be taking on right now. I guess I'm confused on that part, trying to understand where this all works out.
So for council's information, there was culverts across the front of these properties that was not working. If we would have left them in place, properties and potentially the town's road would still continue to be flooding today, and there would be no repair to occur for those folks. So certainly, yes, there was something in place, but it was in a state where it was draining, but not in an efficient manner to provide a drainage solution for upstream properties. So they, in essence, were hindering drainage in a roadside ditch that was causing problems upstream. So we came in, we removed the culverts to do the repair. The ideal situation would have been waiting till we had the dilapidated culvert policy that was just approved by council in place before we did this. If it was in place, what was done out there would have occurred the exact same way as it sits today, with the exception that their driveway culverts would have probably been about half the size of what they are today. So they would have only had a 15-foot wide driveway. Some of them have 30-foot wide driveways. Some of them have 20-foot driveways. So what occurred out there is in keeping closely with the dilapidated culvert policy that was just approved. And certainly their driveways would have been a lot narrower than what was provided to them as it sits today. So the essence of them wanting to participate as part of the town coming in to complete the rest of their infill, the policy speaks to the resident paying for that pipe that is required to complete the rest of their infill, including the pipe that was already installed under their driveway. So that is what is being proposed and offered to the folks. And that is what is in keeping with the policy that was just approved. In addition to that, we would be offering them the payment plan and offering them 100 days, 120 days to offer approvals and things of that nature.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councilor Desjardins.
Thank you. Through you, I'm with Deputy Mayor Malash trying to wrap my head around the culvert situation. Like, we need the culvert there to drain the water, correct?
No, we don't need the culvert there to drain the water. The way the ditch sits today drains the water. The culvert is needed for them to have a nice front yard.
Okay. Because it bothers me that when you explain it that way, it makes a little bit more sense, but it bothers me that we've torn everything up and then we're charging them to put back what they had before. That's where I'm having trouble in my head putting it together. Sorry.
While you ponder that, Councilor Desjardins, we have Councilor Carrick with a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just, oh, wait. All right, now, okay, I'm getting this. So if I heard you correctly, Peter, the reason theirs was all dug up was because it's basically becoming inefficient or not working properly and causing the issues. Is that the reason why it was all dug up and now it's left as an open drain?
It was causing flooding problems to 5 other residents, and that's why the repair was put in place. Well, that's why it was dug up, yes.
Okay, so further then, so then the complaints we're getting where it's falling in already, we clean it out and it's kind of the debris. Their culverts were part of the issue of the flooding. That's why we had to take it all out, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
We have a mover. Do we have a seconder or more questions? Councillor Carrick, is that a question or second? Second, okay. Second by Councillor Carrick. I saw Deputy Mayor Malash's hand. Did you have a question or were you seconding?
Just one more question.
Sure, go ahead.
So the residents who we've removed it and now they're looking to put it back in, were they the ones who initially installed it and was it approved to be installed?
Correct.
It was approved and then the drainage issues occurred because of a breakdown? I guess I'm just trying to figure this out, sorry.
Steel pipe in the ground tends to corrode and rot away. So again, they have followed the proper process back in the 80s when the pipe was installed. It was installed. It has deteriorated over time. This has happened many times throughout the town with various residents in the town. As part of that, again, the infill across the front of a property is not a drainage requirement. It is a requirement to make the house look nicer for the people not to have to maintain a ditch and things of that nature. So they have elected to fill it in. It's not really a requirement of the town to do so. And as such, that would be the replacement and responsibility for them to replace that culvert. So what the town has done through the dilapidated culvert policy is greatly subsidized that activity because we recognize the drainage affects other people, but we shouldn't be, 30,000 residents shouldn't be paying for one person's beautification of their front yard. And so that is what the policy has been put in place to try to deal with over the time as these things have occurred. The records back from the 80s and 90s are few and far between. We wouldn't be able to pinpoint whether they had proper approval or things of that nature, but certainly it was in place and we will recognize it as that and continue to progress forward with trying to make a recommendation and trying to follow some sort of policy that has been, that was somewhat loosely in place and more conveniently now that is currently in place.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? I'm just making sure they went up quick. I have, can you hold your hand up so I can see? 1, 2, 3. Okay, that carries. Opposed, if any? None. Okay, that carries. Thank you. Item E8, request to construct wood privacy fence. Mr. Miller.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So we have received a request from the resident at 61 Adams Lane, Franca Phoebe, to have the municipality construct a wood privacy fence adjacent to her property. As background, the town purchased property known as 1390 Front Road, which is at the corner of Front Road and Adams Lane. And since the demolition of the house and the garage, that owner has come forward with a number of concerns. And I think the rationale that she has put forward with respect to the town constructing the wood fence is outlined in a couple of pieces of correspondence or emails that are attached to the report. When the request first came to the municipality, she was advised that the town's practice is to construct chain link fence where public property comes adjacent to private property. Understanding that that was not sufficient in her view, she's requested through this report that council consider constructing a wood privacy fence. I have had a conversation with the Public Works and Park staff. Certainly chain link fence is what the town installs as a standard practice, although there have been really few cases where we have entered into an agreement with those owners where we would contribute the cost of the chain link fence to them. They would then become responsible to construct the wooden fence on their own property as part of their own contract. So As part of this report and recommendation, we're suggesting that we do offer, in the first instance, that we would contribute to the construction of the fence through the contribution of a chain link, barring the owner not wishing to enter into that agreement, that we would continue to construct a new chain link fence in accordance with our standard practices. If you have any questions, certainly we've attached, I believe, all the correspondence that we've had between administration and the owner at 61 Adams Lane. And she has outlined, I believe in her view, the reasons that a privacy fence is required.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I see Deputy Mayor Meloche first.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. Through you to Mr. Miller. I guess my question is, I know we really don't have a final plan for our waterfront property yet. We're unsure what that corner really is going to be. If, because it's a big if still, we decided that is going to be a parking lot, are there certain requirements when you go and put in a parking lot? Like, are you required to provide privacy to the house? So let's say our cars would pull in and face the house and the headlights would come against the house. Is there a requirement on us to provide some sort of partition?
I don't think there's any requirements. Certainly that would be something council could consider as part of the overall development of the park. I don't think we provided a privacy fence, if I recall correctly, at Vince Marcotte Park, where we have the parking lot and then we have the adjacent. I think in that situation, there is a chain link fence, but the homeowners have constructed a wood privacy fence behind it. I'm not sure which came first in that exact situation, but and I noted that in the report. Certainly we don't know what that's going to be, possibly a parking lot, but we don't know probably for another 6 or 12 months exactly how that corner is actually going to develop.
Thank you for that. I just want to be sure we're kind of following the same guidelines we set out for some of our own developments that we see. I'm thinking of the one on Front Road there that we did last year, where they wanted to put in the 4 or 5 plex, and we requested that they put in some sort of a barrier. And I think we were okay with even plants of some type tall enough being installed, and wasn't sure if that was a requirement on a municipality as well. I understand her concern. I mean, obviously losing that barrier of a home, she probably does have a lot more noise than she's ever had before. So I would definitely like to see us do something besides the chain link fence. So if that is, giving her that portion of the cost to be able to construct her own wood fence until we decide what we're doing with our area, I'd be in favor of that.
Thank you. Councillor Carrick.
Okay, thank you. So I know it's a little different, but at the end of the day, I don't really have a problem with putting a solid fence up there rather than a chain link fence. I said only because we tore the house down. It's on a highway. It's probably going to be a parking lot. I'm guessing. I might not be right, but it might be. Cars are going to come in and out of there, so I don't want to have to go back and have to deal with this later. I think it'd only be fair, and because it is on a highway 18, it's separate from an individual spots in the town. And the fact that we just freshly did this, there's an opportunity maybe to put the fence up, and I would support us doing the fence. And this is a one-off because it's not setting a precedent, and it's up against the highway. And if we buy more properties against the highway, and we do that, then we'd have to look at that also. But this is a unique situation, and protecting against a parking lot in a very busy spot, and we're going to need off-street parking as we develop down the road. So I'd be very in favor of doing a privacy fence.
I'm going to have Joe, the CAO, put in a comment there, because this could be precedent setting. If you look at the fence that's there now and what was before, and I'll let the CAO speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think one of the challenges we have with this particular request is that, again, we have had other areas within the town that we can look to that the town has put forward a park and has in some cases not put any fencing. In some cases it has been just a chain link fence. We have not elected to put a privacy fence in a park setting, and even from the perspective of If you look at some of our trailways that run in between homes, those fences are generally chain link in nature and they're not privacy fences. So again, this particular property has some uniqueness to it in terms of the location. However, it is going to be abutted by a park on two sides and is abutted by a neighbor on another side. And so it would be difficult for us to go forward and recommend that we put some sort of privacy fence here, because we will quickly become inundated with requests from any homeowner that lives abutting a park or any other type of municipal facility to have a privacy fence. So again, that's why the recommendation is before council in the manner that it is, in which that again, we will either provide a chain link fence or provide funding toward a value of the chain link fence so that the homeowner can construct a fence which they desire.
Thank you, Mr. Militia. And maybe just for council's reminder, you may want to look at the email sent to Mr. Miller where the resident complains about certain things that they're still going to be there, whether it's kids at the hangout or the park behind him or the old LaSalle Youth Center. That building is now gone, but putting a privacy fence here is not going to correct her problems. And I'm concerned it may set a precedent going forward, as Mr. Militia pointed out, in other areas in the town. Any questions? I don't see any. Councilor's pleasure. Councilor Desjardins.
I would be willing to make a motion that we offer the price of the chain link to the resident so that they can build their own privacy fence.
So that is what the recommendation is, that we
Yeah.
contribute the cost of a chain link fence.
Yeah.
Moved by Councilor Desjardins, seconded by Councilor Licio Spagnolo. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. I see, Anita, your hand was up. I just want to make sure I'm counting right. Anita, Sue, Jeff, 3. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Item F or G1, council member, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. E8, Sterling Lake Draft Plan of Subdivision. Mr. Solani, and just a reminder to council members that there is an addendum to that you would have received. Mr. Solani.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just jump in
sorry.
there. We have received 2 addendums that were issued, one from Mr. Coltart, I believe, and one from Mr. Tanner representing Dillon Consulting.
Sorry, I was correct myself. There was 2, not 1. Mr. Solani.
Your worship and members of council, the town received a request on June the 9th from the owners of the Sterling Lakes Draft Plan of Subdivision, and we've included a copy of that as an attachment to our report. That request was for council to designate a portion of the lands within 300 meters of the existing manufacturing operation there at 5000 Howard Business Parkway as a class 4 designation under the Ministry of the Environment's NPC 300 noise guidelines. In addition, there are additional recommendations that were made as part of that June 9th correspondence to address an appeal that was filed by the owner of that particular manufacturing plant against a decision of the County of Essex. So the County of Essex back in May of this year granted draft approval to that particular subdivision to phase 1 with conditions, and that was appealed on June the 11th. So in the June 9th letter from Dillon Consulting, the engineering planning consultant for the developer, they make a number of requests, and one is the class 4 designation. There's also a recommendation for creating a commercial buffer immediately adjacent to the west and to the south of the plant, and to eliminate any noise sensitive land uses such as clinics, daycares, and those sorts of uses, and to put in warning clauses on lands within that 300-meter area. We have reviewed that request, and staff, both engineering and planning at the town, are in support of the designation being adopted by council under that particular guideline, and also of incorporating in our subdivision agreement the warning clause requirement that would then be applied to any lot that's created or any multi-unit residential property within that 300-meter area. We also have prepared draft zoning bylaw amendment documents, and those are in the council agenda package under bylaws. One of those will be the bylaw that that zones the lands in the neighborhood commercial zone that eliminates all of the noise sensitive land uses, which creates that commercial buffer. And then the second bylaw pertains to the subdivision itself and zones all of those lands for the various land uses for the future school, the parks, the low density and medium density residential, and so forth. So those are later in the agenda. And there's one other item through the discussions that took place as well. What was put forward is a recommendation that the developer build an earthen berm to the south and west as well. And that will provide some additional reductions in noise at the ground level, as well as provide some aesthetic relief for folks that are going to be living in the adjacent residential areas that are part of the Sterling Lake development. So we are in support of this request for the reasons as outlined in the report, and we're available for questions.
Sorry, we had technical difficulties. Oh.
While the mayor is just logging back in, if I can just reference Councillor Carrick for a question.
No question, just going to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Technical difficulties in the Zoom world. Moved by Councillor Carrick, seconded by Councillor Reno, or did you have a question? Second, Deputy Mayor Milosh, I saw your hand. Did you have a question or you were second? Okay, so we have mover and seconder, all in favor. That carries. Thank you, Mr. Solani. Now, item G1, council member attendance at meetings for Q2 April to June 20th. Council's pleasure. Moved by Councilor Desjardins, seconded by Deputy Mayor Milosh, all in favor. That carries. Thank you. Item G2, May 2020 financial statement and financial reports. Any questions? Dale, is there anything you want to add to that?
I don't have anything to add to this report. We're going to go over the financial update with respect to the COVID crisis on the next report. So I'll kind of speak to everything in that report.
Okay.
But I'd be happy to answer any questions if there's any detailed questions on the statements.
Any questions from council? Seeing none, I have one, Mr. Langlois. I'm just looking at the supplemental levy. So that would say that we're above budget and we're not even at year end. So we're getting good constructions. Is that correct?
Yes, since the last couple of months, since construction's been allowed to start back up, we've had some good activity that's on par with last year, maybe even a little bit higher in the last month. So that's some good news.
Well, that's good news in this COVID-19 situation. Thank you. Council's pleasure. Moved by Councilor Desjardins, seconded by Councilor Reno. All in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. Item G3, COVID-19 financial impact update. Mr. Langlois.
So this is the second update on the COVID financial impact. The last one was done as at April 30th. So I guess some good news. If you look at the summary, it's on Appendix A. Since April 30th, we've actually improved a little bit. There's been a lot of effort in saving costs, delaying hiring of different positions, and just corresponding cost savings. We aren't using the fields at the Vollmer, so we're not having to purchase as many supplies and paint and all that kind of stuff. So there is a lot of additional expenses, but there's also some savings that are happening right now. I attached the original report that kind of outlines in detail all of the different risks, and those really haven't changed too much since the last report. But the major risks that we have, I guess I call it a short-term risk over the next year, is going to be once we reach the fall months and the impact of lost revenue at the Vollmer Center with regards to the arena rentals. The other areas such as a pool and whatnot, the cost to operate those are eliminated along with the revenue, so that financial impact isn't as high. But with the arena rentals being rented out at rounded $200 an hour, that adds up really quick. And the financial impact, if we aren't able to open that this winter, could be approximately $700,000. So that's our biggest short-term risk. And then the biggest long-term risk, along with any municipality or country in the world for that matter, is the long-term economic impact that this might have. But it's kind of too early to tell at this point what that might be. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Longwood. Councillor Carrick.
Yeah, sorry for bugging you. Just kidding. The last time we talked, when the original report came out, we were like, so I think, quote me if I'm wrong or correct me if I'm wrong, we were $400,000 in the hole. Did I hear that right? Is that still accurate, or are we?
Last report, we were 260,000, the additional cost. And this report, we're at about 201,000.
So we're back a little bit.
Yeah, we've had some additional savings. Like, we've had a lot of additional expenditures, but we've also had some additional savings with not hiring the different or prolonging the hiring of different positions, and as an example. And then also, our transit system that operates at a cost, and we're not paying as much in fuel because it's not running as often. So those are just some examples.
So if I could just make a general statement then, all the cities are crying wolf. They all want money from the upper levels of government. So would that, so maybe they should just remember the small municipalities as well. So when the time comes around that we get active and we progressively go after them for money.
Absolutely. 100%.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good answer, Dale. Councillor Akpata.
Dale, to you and your team, I'm very impressed with our numbers. I was, when the package arrives at my home and I start to look through it, I flipped right to yours because it's the number that I was dreading to see. So kudos to everyone in the municipality for doing the best they possibly can. As we can imagine, we see what's going on not only in Ontario but around the world and in other provinces, and I'm very surprised at where we're at, but I'm quite pleased, and that speaks to some of the things that you and the CAO and the rest of the leadership team have been doing to mitigate what we're going through. So hopefully it works out as well as we can. And as to the other comments, it would be nice to see some of the other levels of government recognize and see what we're doing. But I hope that at the end of the day, we can minimize the impact to the municipality and to the things that we need to do here in the community. But like I said, outstanding report. And I truly believe the gumption it took to mitigate the total economic damage that other areas are seeing. So congratulations to you and your team for all the responsible financial work you've been doing.
Thank you. Just another comment on upper levels of government relief. I think Mr. Militia mentioned it on the April report, but usually the economic relief is in the form of stimulus funding and of different grants that could potentially come out. And that's what happened in 2008, 2009, when we were in the Great Recession there. And we were successful at that point in time in receiving quite a few quite a few of those grants, which are very significant. So we're keeping our eyes open for any opportunities that are coming down, and hopefully if they come down, we can be successful in receiving some of those grants. I know one, I don't know if it corresponds to this, but there's a grant that we had applied for. We didn't receive it. It's a large grant, and they've kind of opened that back up. So we're still in the running at this point. That's with regards to the front road, some of the pump stations along there. So we're still in the running for that. So that might kind of tie into this and be the beginning of some of the additional funding that's becoming available. So we'll keep council in the loop if anything, if we're aware of anything that comes down the pipe.
Thanks, Dale. That's a good point. And on that funding, we have to match a certain percentage, and we're in a good financial position to do that. Not all municipalities are. So we should be hopefully in the running for those. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions, council? Council's pleasure. Deputy Mayor Meloche moved by Deputy Mayor Meloche, seconded by Councillor Reno. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Update to facility rentals, outdoor sports surface use policy. Council's pleasure. Councillor Reno.
I'll move to receive.
Moved by Councillor Reno, seconded by Deputy Mayor Meloche. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Okay, and we have in the addendum the flood and or emergency response evacuation plan with interim guidelines for COVID-19. Deputy Mayor Meloche, question, or you're moving? Moving? Moved by Deputy Mayor Meloche, seconded by Councillor Adiccio Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Summary of reports to council dated July 14, 2020. Moved by Councillor Desjardins, seconded by Councillor Deputy Mayor Meloche. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. On our bylaws, all three readings. Moved by Councillor Desjardins, seconded by Deputy Mayor Meloche. All in favor? Oh, sorry, I have a question. Deputy Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you. When I'm looking at the bylaws, are not 8440 and 8442, isn't 42 a duplicate of 40? It reads the same way, and it's the same lots, 412 to 439, registered plan 777. They look like a duplicate to me.
Yes, apparently it is.
Okay. Thank you. I'll move the bylaws then.
Thank you, Councillor Desjardins. We will take that motion with the condition we are removing bylaw number 8442. Thank you. Councillor Ekpata.
Looking at it again, Your Worship, and maybe it's my eyes. 45 and 46. 550, the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw. 550, the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw. Or is there a reason that they're there?
There's two separate zonings.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Okay. Yeah. Your same bylaw, Councillor Ekpata, just for different properties.
Got it. Just wanted to make sure, Your Worship. Thank you, sir.
So we moved by Councillor Desjardins. Did we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Meloche. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. council questions. We'll go with Councillor Carrick, Councillor Reno, then Councillor Riccio Spagnolo.
Thank you. Just a quick question. It's been a while, but since the Malden Road rezoning, basically holding residents or commercial in other areas, can we get a report maybe at budget time or maybe early in the new year in regards to possibly looking at a new setting up a BIA, whether it's supported by the town, supported by a committee of council, or just if we can see if we can get some business people together, because as we continue to grow, it'd be nice to have some input from the business people. I think we had one a very long time ago, maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't heard anything about something like that in the last recent little while. So I'd be very interested if we could talk about it at budget time of implications, or at least a report in the early new year, if that's possible.
CAO will speak to that, Mr. Councillor Carrick.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Carrick. I think that from the perspective of we have not heard much from the LaSalle Business Association. We're really unsure whether that organization still exists in any form. But certainly, again, even from our strategic plan and our economic development strategic plan, there is a number of references to assisting businesses in some capacity, whether that be through a number of forms that are possible, whether some municipalities choose a chamber, some municipalities choose a BIA, some municipalities choose a liaison committee. So we can certainly come back with a report back to council on that. I would suggest it probably is appropriate to either with budget or just shortly after budget would be the appropriate time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is for Joe because his camera's still on. Joe, we are all, as a community, excited about the, change from phase 1 to phase 2 to level 3 to a level, all those provincial things. And you are our go-to guy for the answers and how it relates to us. And just today, I fielded 2 questions from residents that I was uncomfortable trying to answer. And that is, with the City of Windsor opening their splash pads, where are we in that loop? We've got some people that were frying last week in the 90-degree heat and are looking forward to that service that we provided. And the other one, apparently there's an arena in Windsor that is opening very limitedly for hockey workouts and practices. So there's a question out in the community as well. Where do we have to be in the provincial framework before we can see some type of return to use at the Vollmer, whether it be in a limited socially distanced capacity or at all? We're just looking for a little bit of insight, please.
Certainly, thank you for the question, Councillor Reno. So this was an item of conversation this morning at this morning's Emergency Operations Center meeting with respect to where we stand with, normally we meet every second Tuesday with respect to our dealing with the COVID pandemic as well as the flooding issues that we have had. So again, both those items in terms of the splash pad and the use of the Vollmer were items of conversation. And really, I guess from in a very high level summary on the splash pad being your first question, the conditions in which we would have to operate the splash pad under phase 2 are quite excessive when it comes to how we would need to staff it, fence it, and clean it. And so from that perspective, it would be very cost prohibitive for us to operate it in the manner that is recommended under the guidelines. We can choose to operate it with no fencing and no staff supervision. However, we have been advised, again, that as complaints are lodged, and we can expect that complaints will be lodged by folks that are using the facilities regarding other individuals that are not respecting the social distancing parameters, that we will be required to operate with the fencing and staffing situation. And so in conversations with the mayor and conversations with the Emergency Operations Center, we've elected to keep the splash pads closed. However, we'll be revisiting that as we move to stage 3. Stage 3, once this region moves to that, will indicate among many things, but will also indicate that many of the park equipment and the playground equipment will be open for use. And so that really gets really interesting as we try to open up both the playground equipment that is adjacent to the splash pad as well as the splash pad. So we suspect that there will be some loosening of the restrictions. Again, there'll still be requirements for physical distancing and things of that nature, but we anticipate that we will be reviewing how the splash pad could operate under a stage 3 opening. And again, depending on who you want to believe, the stage 3 opening for this region could be as soon as Monday, or it could be a few weeks away. But we are planning again, we are planning from our perspective that we will be prepared to revisit this towards the end of the month, and hopefully we'll have some good news for folks early in August. With respect to the Vollmer operation, that being your second question, again, we have canceled all the programming at the Vollmer until July 31st. This morning we had elected to continue that cancellation into August until August 31st. However, we do recognize that there are some limited things that we can be doing at the Vollmer, and more pointedly with the arena operation. So there's a number of users, figure skating and hockey, that we will be allowing to use, and almost on a soft launch, if you will, at the Vollmer to see what we can do and try to get folks in and out safely with respect to how we would operate the Vollmer. Again, the challenge we have is really around the physical distancing side. Both from the splash pad and the operations of the Vollmer. If you can imagine, I'm not sure what individual we're going to want to staff, and I don't know how much we're going to pay them to sit at the splash pad and try to guard the kids and try to ensure that they remain socially distant or physically distant from one another while playing on the splash pad. That is virtually impossible to do. And again, I would not want that job because I think we will get inundated with a number of complaints because we will have staff there. And equally in the Vollmer, again, we are working with a number of the user groups to get the proper protocols in place to have users safely in and out of the building and using the facilities appropriately. I know Ms. Fernaro in the Culture and Rec area, as well as Mr. Masanovich in the Public Works area, are going through that process and trying to develop those protocols on how to safely use the building. We're hoping that it'll be a bit of a learning experience. Again, we mentioned this morning that unfortunately we are not moving to phase 3 to stage 3 in this region. However, again, on the positive note, moving to keeping or staying in stage 2 while others are moving to stage 3 allows us the ability to learn off of some of their best practices as they go through their process. So there is a silver lining. Sometimes you really got to look, but there is a silver lining to staying in stage 2. I think we are all, the community, again, we as a municipality, the community is all anxious. The calls that members of council are getting are very similar to some of the ones that we're fielding here in terms of trying to create a bit more of that, continue on that path to the new normal. But we are, again, the largest side of things that we are going to be challenged with is the physical distancing. The internal or the indoor requirements for gatherings, I believe, are up to 50 under stage 3, 100 under the outdoor side of things. But the physical distancing is really the issue that we will probably be grappling with. I know that we have opened, again, the field use to the Stompers organization to some of their more competitive teams for training purposes. And so they are utilizing those and trying to develop those exercises and training opportunities for their players. But again, it's pretty difficult when the kids want to have fun. And I think that's really where the basis starts. And it's difficult to do that when everybody's got to stay 2 meters apart. So we will, like I said, we will continue again from our perspective, as well as in terms of the town hall operations. Once we get to stage 2 or stage 3, we will be looking at how we operate our town hall meetings. Again, continued use of conferencing, virtual conferencing, as we see here, particularly where again, our next meeting in July, we will start some of the public consultation and allowing some of the public feedback coming through. That'll be our first meeting on that. So we look forward to seeing how that goes and ensuring that we have the proper processes in place. But it has been a challenge, and we understand that again, the public has been very patient. We understand that there have been some touch points, particularly when the Fahrenheit scale or the Celsius scale reaches the numbers we reached a few weeks ago. And unfortunately, it looks like we're headed towards that path in the coming week. So again, from our perspective, we're trying to keep patrons safe. We're trying to keep our staff safe as we go through this and trying to abide by as many guidelines as we can to ensure that that happens.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So what people can expect is that because the phase 2 restrictions are very hard for us to comply with, we are going to look forward to phase 3 whenever that happens. And when that happens, we should be able to look to the municipality for some fairly quick turnaround.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Good question, Councilor Reno. Not an easy decision we made, but I think it's the right one. I've stated before, we're not here to make the popular decision. We're here to make the right decision for the municipality. So I have Councilor Adiccio Spagnolo.
Thank you. The question was actually Councilor Reno had asked. So, but thank you for the answers, and thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Akpata.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have 2 questions. One is to Mr. Solani. Sir, I've had a couple of calls from people in the Head to Moore subdivision who are just inquiring about the go forward procedure that's going to happen. I know you and I have spoken about it before. Can you clarify what's going on in that area so I can bring this back to these folks and let them know what's transpiring, sir, please?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Akpata. What is the current status is basically summarized as follows. The developer was not able to complete some of the servicing in that particular phase. There were some issues that they had to work through with a pipeline company, and that caused them some delay, and the infrastructure isn't complete. So as a result, the lots could not be created through the part lot control process. So there's just blocks of land, and there actually isn't legal building lots that are available at this time. We now understand that that has been resolved with the pipeline company. They are going to be realigning some of the road and some of the infrastructure in that area in order to be able to go forward. We're expecting that a report should be available. We're just waiting for a reference plan from the developer, and a report should go at the end of this month to council in order to get a council resolution that could go to the County of Essex, who would then have to approve the part lot control bylaw exemption that legally creates these lots that individuals could then go forward and be able to get building permits on.
And a supplemental to Mr. Solani, if everything goes the way it's supposed to, what would you anticipate based on your previous experience, the timetable for that to be, sir?
Given the fact that we only control part of the process in the sense that the bylaw and the final approval comes from the County of Essex, who's the approval authority for subdivisions. We are anticipating that it probably will be a number of weeks after it goes to them before it comes back and it gets registered so that the lots are legally created. But if everything goes well, we're hoping that by the end of August, those lots will then be up and running and actually be legal conveyable properties.
Thank you, Mr. Solani. Your Worship, may I ask my second question?
Yes, Councilor Akpata.
Through you, Your Worship, I believe this one's going to Jonathan Osborne. I've received a couple of calls about some companies that are providing some cabling, whether it's internet cable or something to people's lawns, and they understand that it's on the municipal easement. Is there a phone number, or is there something that the municipality can give to these folks if they're not satisfied with what is being done on the easement that they view to be their property, sir?
Yeah, we do have phone numbers for each of the fiber companies. So if someone does call the Public Works office, we'll usually give them a phone number and ask that they make an attempt to call the fiber companies. If they end up not having very much luck, we will, come back and assist. But to try to reduce the volume a bit, we're asking they make that initial call. So we do have some phone numbers that if they reach out to us, we can provide them with.
And just a supplemental, that's to the Public Works Department, and then you'll be able to give them those numbers.
Yep, that's the best bet, to talk to our Public Works clerks.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Ekpata. Mr. Solani, just to follow up on Councillor Ekpata's question in relation to those lots, how many are there in total?
Your worship, I don't have the plan in front of me, but if my memory serves me, I thought it was somewhere in the order of 30 to 40 were in that phase.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Statements by council members. Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you. Through you to my fellow council people, to the Department of Public Works, Peter. I just want to say thank you to everybody on behalf of the June 27th Miracle team, because LaSalle, of course, did amazingly. We owe a lot of thanks to Public Works and to the town for letting us use the Westport building that we're trying to slowly empty out. It doesn't look as much of a disaster area as it did 10 days ago, thank goodness. But it was important to say thank you to everybody. We appreciate the cooperation through all the departments. The police were great on the 27th. I know that we tied up traffic on Front Road a couple of times, but it was for a good cause. And again, the town of LaSalle came out on top, and we look really good. And we've got a bunch of really good people that have come in to help sort. And we're now distributing, and we're just doing a really good job. So thank you, everybody, for the support. It's appreciated.
Thank you for that statement, Councillor Desjardins. And we did help out, but it's good that we help those families in need. That we take it for granted sometimes how many in this meeting don't have that issue of where we're going to get our next meal. And it felt really good to help out that day. And everybody, thank you again for helping out. Reports from committees. Notices of motion. Confirmatory bylaw. First reading, Councillor Reno, Councillor Ekpata. All in favor? That carries. Second reading, Councillor Edicio Spagnolo and Councillor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries. Third final reading, Deputy Mayor Meloche and Councillor Carrick. All in favor? That carries. You have your schedule of meetings coming up. Meeting adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.